The lost key. The wife of one of my girlfriend's distant relatives passed away a while ago. I met her a few times. She seemed like a kind person. It was sad. She died at the young age of 35, leaving behind 3 kids. She was smart, personable, and well liked by many of her peers. The family had a traditional Hmong service, so there were lots of people and food was being cooked around the clock, which was the norm. That weekend, I spent a few hours at the funeral home each day to help out or hang out, while my girlfriend helped in the kitchen. It was quite common in the Hmong culture for funerals to be social events, since they lasted for days. It was evening on the first night when I went to the dining hall for dinner. My girlfriend Dee came by and we talked for a bit since we hadn't seen each other all day. "What a day," Dee sighed. "What's going on? Why the long face?" I asked as I stuffed myself with a spoonful of rice and meat. "Because," she paused for a moment as if to gather her thoughts, then said, "everyone has been fighting and bickering all day." "What, like a flock of hens?" I laughed. "I'm kidding." "Anyways," she responded with an eye roll. "But for real, what's everyone fighting about?" She eyed me seriously, narrowing her eyes to see if I had any wise remarks before speaking. "So, everyone has been fighting about everything, like what to cook, how much to make. There's been a lot of tension in there," Dee said, nodding her head in the direction of the kitchen. I listened while I ate my meal as she ranted about her experience throughout the day. She said in addition to all the bickering, the auntie in charge of food operations was micromanaging everyone, which made things worse. It sounded like the fighting was a symptom of the auntie's management style. I felt sorry for Dee and the rest of the women, but there was nothing I could do, especially being an outsider. "Where's the damn key? Who took it?" a female voice yelled from the kitchen. "That her?" I asked, looking in that direction. Dee nodded. The woman was in her 50s. She was short and had wavy medium-length hair. She had an apron draped over a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, which was typical as some of the women weren't really there to attend the service, but rather were there to work. Same could be said about some of the men. It's not uncommon to see people not in formal attire at Hmong funeral services. "Give her a break. She seems like a sweet lady," I said with a grin. "Then you go work in the kitchen," Dee shouted and stomped off. After the burial, Dee told me about what happened. She said the key her auntie was looking for was for the meat freezer. It was always locked, and the only person who had access to it was her. No one was allowed to get anything in there without her overseeing it. Apparently, the key went missing for about 5 hours, and they had no meat to cook. The women looked everywhere and couldn't find it. Then all of a sudden, it just reappeared on top of the freezer as if someone had placed it there. The freezer wasn't even locked, nor was there anything missing from it. No one admitted to taking the key. On the second day of the funeral, Dee's cousin Mindy showed up asking about the lost key from the night before. Everyone was surprised because, aside from the people in the kitchen, no one else knew about it. That, and Mindy wasn't even there the night the key went missing. "How'd she know?" I asked. "Mindy is a medium. She can talk to spirits," replied Dee. "Basically, Mindy spoke with my relative's late wife, and she was unhappy with us fighting, so she took the key, hoping we'd stop." Last night, I awoke suddenly to the sound of the drum and ling on a bench inside a lobby. Was it morning? I couldn't tell, since the only source of light was from the fluorescent ones mounted from the ceiling. Aside from a few people there, the lobby was practically empty. What happened last night? How'd I end up here? I sat up from my seat and rubbed the crust from my eyes. Everything seemed like a blur. I only recalled bits and pieces of it. Before I blacked out and ended up here, I remembered hanging out and drinking with the guys outside. Speaking of, how much did I drink? I felt like crap and needed some water. I stumbled down the hall to use the bathroom and freshen up, then grabbed a bottle of water before heading into the chapel. I sat in the last pew and guzzled it down. Taking a moment to survey the room, I noticed my friends at the front amongst the crowd by the casket. The exact same group of guys I hung out with yesterday. Did they also stay overnight? I wondered. I made my way over to them, and got increasingly more anxious the closer I got to the front. I saw cousins, relatives, and friends I hadn't seen in a while. They were in tears and embracing one another. I was confused as to whose funeral it was, since my friends and I didn't know the deceased personally. Crashing weddings and funerals was sort of our thing. Just a group of single guys looking for some fun and companionship. That was our life after our divorces. Well, some of us anyway. I was really surprised to see my ex-wife with our 2 kids. My entire family was there as well. All of them were in tears, especially my mom, who was crying hysterically while my dad comforted her. My stomach was in knots at that point, and my heart pounded almost as loud as the beating drum I passed by. Had someone close to us died that I didn't know about? I wanted to run out of there, but something propelled me forward. I needed to find out what was going on. Time stood still, everything around me went mute, and my heart stopped as I stood next to my parents and glanced down into the open coffin. It was even worse than I could have ever imagined as I came face to face with myself. No! How is this possible? I gasped and stumbled backward as the whole world spun around me. Like a dam collapsing from the weight of the water, flashes of my memories came flooding through my mind all at once. The experience was nauseating. In the visions, I saw myself hanging out with a group of my friends outside the funeral home. We were out there drinking late into the night until I went inside to rest on the bench in the lobby. Sometime during the night, I got up and decided to drive home. I blacked out during the trip and my car drove off the bridge and plummeted into the depths of the river below. No, I refused to believe it. I ran over to my parents, frantically trying to get their attention. Mom, Dad, don't cry, I'm right here, I shouted. I tried again and again, but they couldn't hear me. Mom continued to cry with Dad by her side, holding her. I turned to my kids, who were also next to them. Kids! Hey kids! It's Dad! I'm right here! I cried, waving my arms from side to side. I tried over and over, but like my parents, they also couldn't hear me. It was the same with my friends and everyone else there. Son, they can't hear you no matter how hard you try, said a male voice from behind me. I spun around to see an elderly Hmong man in traditional garbs. He looked somewhat familiar. I could see the pews all the way to the back wall through his transparent form, but wasn't sure if it was my eyes playing tricks on me. Who are you? You can hear me? I asked. The old man nodded. I am Chai Lu, and we're your ancestors. We're here to guide you home. As soon as he said that, 4 others appeared from out of nowhere next to him. 3 men and a woman. Like Chai Lu, I could also see through their bodies. They were all dressed in traditional Hmong or Chinese outfits, except the old skinny bald man in a suit and tie. He had a short but flowy goatee. I recognized him immediately. Uncle Chong? Is that really you? I cried as I ran over to embrace him. I phased through his body and fell onto the floor. I lay there confused as I looked to my uncle for an answer to what just happened. Son, you are stuck between both worlds. You must let go. It is for your own good and theirs. Their sorrow will remain here if you stay, Uncle Chong said, nodding his head toward my family. I rose to my feet. But Uncle, my kids are still very young. They still need me. I want to watch them grow up, I protested as tears swelled around my eyes. I understand your pain, but there's no way around this, Uncle Chong responded. Your kids will be fine. They're in the hands of a good woman. That's debatable, I scoffed. It's her fault I'm dead. If I wasn't... Silence! Chai Lu roared, cutting me off mid-sentence. A crack of thunder reverberated throughout the room, startling me. The lights flickered, causing the rest of the room to look up at them. Even in death, you're still the same. You had your chance and you blew it. You've always sung the same tune over and over. It's never your fault. You think we don't know? Do not test us. The old man continued ripping into me with his words, calling me a drunk, then proceeded to list out all my faults and secrets. He was right. I couldn't even deny them. By the time he was done, I was filled with shame and guilt. In life, I was a horrible husband and father who prioritized time hanging out and drinking with friends before my own family. I even went as far as cheating on my wife on a few occasions. When I was with the family, I was always too drunk to be present. Eventually, my wife left me, and then I accused her of adultery to spite her. "You're right," I said. "The children are better without me. I'm better dead than alive. I've been nothing but a disgrace to you all and to them. I'm terribly sorry." "There will be more than enough time to make amends, but for now, let us go," Uncle Chung said, putting a hand on my shoulder. With that, I felt as if a huge weight lifted off me. I hugged my uncle, and we both cried. I hadn't even realized it, but my body had become transparent like the others. With a wave of Chailu's hand, a rift to a lush green field opened up beside him, and he stepped in, followed by the others. My uncle and I entered next. I took one last look at my family from the other side. "I'm sorry for all the hardships I've caused you all. If given the chance in another life, I promise to make it up to you. I love you," I said, wiping away the tears from my face. I turned and followed the others further into the field. As we walked, I kept glancing back at the other side of the rift. It shrunk more and more with each passing second, until the opening was completely gone, leaving only the blue sky above us and the green grass beneath our feet. And that was the end of my previous life. A moment to remember. It was a Saturday evening. I was driving home from work when my cell phone rang. The caller ID read, "A-hole." I picked up the call. "Hey, what's up, Kong?" I asked. "I'm chillin'. What are you doing right now?" "Just got off work. I'm heading home. Why?" "Let's get the boys together and kick it tonight." "I don't know. I'm pretty tired." "Come on, man. It's been a minute since we last kicked it. It'll be fun, I promise. There's gonna be mad girls. You'll get your pick of the litter," Kong laughed. I told Kong to hold on while I merged my car onto the freeway. "Y'all throwing a party or something?" "You could say that." "What time?" "As soon as possible. Go get dressed. I'll text you the address." We hung up. About 10 minutes later, I was home. While dressing up, my phone buzzed, notifying me I've received a text, though I didn't check the message until I was in the car. I routed it on my phone, and the destination was to a funeral home. I double-checked the address, and sure enough, it was correct, so I called Kong to get some answers. "Did you send me the right address?" I asked. "It's correct. I'll explain more when we get there. I gotta pick up the other guys," Kong responded. He said he couldn't talk since he was driving, and told me to wait in the dining hall when I got there. Before I got another word in, Kong hung up. I couldn't help but think about how awkward it was going to be. I hadn't been to a funeral in a long time, especially a Hmong one. It felt wrong to show up at these events for the purpose of meeting a potential date, plus, I wouldn't know anyone there. What had Kong talked me into? Fortunately, I didn't live too far from the funeral home, and arrived there within 15 minutes. I found parking and thought about sitting in my car until everyone showed up, but didn't like the idea either because it was already dark. I really didn't want to run into any unexpected encounters, so I thought it best to make my way inside. The sound of the qing and drum sent chills down my spine upon entering the building. I always dreaded hearing them. It was why I hardly attended funerals. But Kong was right. I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of young women there. I came through the door of the lobby, and a group of them glanced over at me. I smiled, then averted their gaze, acting as if I knew where I was going, to avoid suspicion. I managed to avoid the chapel, but had to wander around a bit before I stumbled upon the dining hall. There was a decent amount of people in there. The good thing was, it looked like the dinner rush was mostly over. Scanning the room from a distance, I noticed a young woman sitting by herself in a corner. We were about the same age. From where I was, I could only see the side of her face, but could tell she was quite the looker. She wasn't eating, so I assumed, like me, she was waiting on her friends. Excited to strike up a conversation with her, I strolled over as casually but confidently as possible. The closer I got, the better she looked. She was absolutely gorgeous with her smooth, light tan skin and shiny jet black hair. The glistening earrings she wore seemed to add even more to the already alluring effects of her beauty. Time slowed to a crawl, and my feet felt like cylinder blocks. My palms were sweaty, and my heart hammered so fast I thought it was a heart attack. It seemed like hours had gone by before I got over to her table. Our eyes met, and we smiled at one another. She seemed to have a glow about her I couldn't quite explain, almost as if I were face to face with an angel. My knees buckled, and I thought I was going to collapse right in front of her, which would have been beyond embarrassing. But I was steadfast in my determination to not let that happen. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my chest. The words wouldn't come out. I probably looked like I was having a seizure or dry heaving the words from my mouth. "Any," I said, my mind drawing a blank, pausing for a second to start over. Anyone sitting here? You mind if I sit with you?" Still smiling, she shook her head and welcomed me to the seat in front of her. As I pulled the chair out and was about to sit down, I heard a voice from across the room calling for me. "Yo! Over here!" the voice shouted. I recognized it instantly. It was Kong. He's my friend and all, but why does that guy have to be so damn obnoxious sometimes? For whatever reason, it always surprises me, which it shouldn't. We grew up as kids together, but he sure was wrecking my vibe at the moment. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and looked over in that direction. Kong had his arms up and everything. Beside him were 4 of our friends. "Hey, look who it is," I said, faking an awkward smile as I walked over and shook his hand. "Long time no see, bro. You're always working," he said, pulling me in for a tight hug. Everyone greeted me in a similar manner. We went over to the serving table for our food. I glanced back to where the woman was sitting, but she was no longer there. I figured she must have stepped out. I wanted to at least get her name. Bummer. After getting our food, we sat down to eat. I was curious, so I asked Kong whose funeral it was. "You seriously don't know?" he asked, looking at me like I was crazy. I replied, shaking my head since I was still chewing my food. "Bro, where have you been? Living under a rock?" Kong asked with a serious expression, looking around at the other guys as they laughed at my ignorance. His eyes came back to mine. "It's for Gaoxing, the singer?" I washed down my bite of food with a sip of soda, then said, "I've never heard of her." My knowledge of Hmong celebrities and artists was really limited, since I don't really listen or watch any of the movies. I only know of the ones my siblings watched or listened to on YouTube. "She's a real beauty. It's sad she had to pass away so young," one of the other guys said. "You better know Yasmin Disu," Kong said. "She's not quite their level, but she was a rising star. I heard she died of... what do they call it? He looked at each of us for an answer, snapping his fingers as if it would come to him like magic. "You know where your brain is bleeding?" "Oh, you mean a brain aneurysm," I replied. "Yeah, that," Kong exclaimed, pointing a finger at me. He took out his phone, then after scrolling through it, he handed it to me. "That's her." My heart stopped as I stared at the YouTube video playing before me. It was the exact same woman I saw earlier. Only in the video she was dressed in an elegant, modern Hmong dress as she sang. Her voice was equally as beautiful as she was. I didn't dare tell anyone about my encounter, though. Afterward, I excused myself and stopped by her casket to pay my respects, thanking her for sharing that moment with me and wished her well on her journey.